Hello everybody, how are you? David Franco here from GearPop.com with my first impressions of the iPad mini, Space Gray, 16GB Wi-Fi. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so beginning this video, I just want to say one thing in terms of my in a nutshell blurb. This is basically the iPad Air, but smaller. For the most part. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Alright, so getting into the pros right away. The first pro is pretty obvious, guys. If you've been watching my videos, I mean, this doesn't come as a surprise. It's the Retina Display. Seriously, the Retina Display alone has sold me on the iPad mini. Is that my car? No, it is not. It is not my car. Moving on. Anyway, yes guys, the 2048 by 1536 resolution at 326 pixels per inch, that alone has finally convinced me to pick up the iPad mini. Because like last year, I refused to recommend the iPad mini. And guys, believe me, that's saying a lot. Me being the Apple enthusiast, I rarely don't recommend an Apple product. But the fact that they scaled back and kind of went cheap in terms of not including Retina, it was just a stab in my heart. But then again, maybe it was due to cost and battery life, so who knows. The point is, it's finally here, and that's all that matters in my eyes. The second pro I would like to talk about is the form factor. Look at this. I'm holding it with one hand. Now granted, this was technically possible with the iPad Air, but you really had to stretch your hand and it just didn't feel natural. But this was clearly built to use one-handed, and that alone is freaking awesome. I love being able to pick up my iPad mini like this and just use it, you know, go to my home screen, go to Safari, even play Angry Birds or whatever, go to my camera. It's just all around a much better experience than the full-size iPad, at least in my opinion. And guys, I gotta say, it weighs just 0.73 pounds. I mean, every time I pick this up off my desk, my sofa, my bed, wherever it is, I'm still amazed at how truly light this really is. But then again, the iPad Air was just a pound, and I was amazed by that weight. So coming from something as light as that to something even lighter, such as the iPad mini, it's just all around awesome stuff. I mean, Apple really did a great job with form factor and getting this thing to be as light as possible. But that kind of cuts back in terms of performance, so I'll talk about that very soon. However, continuing on with the pros, I gotta say the cameras on this thing are pretty nice. The front-facing 720p FaceTime HD camera is 1.2 megapixels, also known as 720p video, which is plenty good for your selfies, so if you're into that sort of thing, this is actually perfect. But more interestingly, we have a 1080p HD iSight camera, which is technically 5 megapixels resolution. And believe me when I say, the camera does a very nice job. Now, in my opinion, this isn't too big to hold up and take pictures. I mean, this isn't that much bigger than a phablet, you know, such as something like, I don't know, the Galaxy Note 3. Because I know there are some people that despise the idea of holding up an iPad to take a picture. Honestly, guys, it doesn't bother me. I mean, if somebody wants to take a picture of their iPad, it's none of my damn business. It's their iPad, their picture. Who cares? I see it all the time in New York. Why does it matter to you what others do with their product? I never understood that. Anyway, mini rant aside, I gotta say, this definitely does not feel awkward in terms of taking pictures. For instance, just hold it up like so, and boom, look at that. It does not feel large at all. And finally, my last pro in the list is, well, this is the same great iPad experience, but smaller. And by that, I simply mean it supports every single iPad app out there. There's no such thing as fragmentation in the world of iPad. And that's a huge deal, especially if you're used to something like Android or Surface or anything. Not that I'm saying those platforms are bad, but I'm saying Apple has a huge advantage over the competition with thousands upon thousands of iPad native apps that work on no matter what device you use. I mean, of course, as long as it's an iPad. But still, with that said, you can even run iPhone and iPod Touch apps on the iPad, just scaled up. So all around, this is the same great iPad experience we've been used to since 2010, just obviously with Retina Display, smaller form factor, and for the most part, great performance. Alright, so as great as the iPad mini with Retina Display is, unfortunately there are a few cons worth mentioning, so let's get into it. Con number one, and this is something I was really hoping wouldn't come back from the first generation iPad mini without Retina Display. But unfortunately, it's still an issue, and that's the fact that the new iPad mini second generation does indeed have a washed out display, otherwise known as poor gamut. But honestly, I don't really prefer to use the word gamut. I've just never been a fan of that term. I'm not sure why. I just like using the term saturation. It might not be technically the correct term to use, but it still applies. I mean, for instance, even just looking at this, I don't know if you can tell on video, but you can definitely tell right away in person, at least someone like me who cares about pixels and color density and overall performance of a display, then you're going to notice right away. And sadly, that is definitely the case with the iPad mini with the Retina Display. I mean, I noticed right away that the photo booth icon is not nearly as saturated as it could be. Same with Facebook, the mail icon, Tweetbot. Just overall, it's kind of still washed out, just like the first generation iPad mini was. And yes, this is definitely a significant letdown. Now, does that stop me from wanting to keep the iPad mini? Hell no. I mean, this isn't my professional device. It's just a 7.9-inch size tablet that I'll be using for email, Twitter, Facebook, my social media stuff, Instagram, web browsing, and stuff like that. This isn't something I'll be using for graphic design, videography, or anything like that. So basically, the fact that it does have a washout display, it's definitely very disappointing. But that's not going to make me not want to recommend the iPad mini, because the Retina display and the high pixel density count makes this worth owning, at least in my opinion. But with that said, if a washed out display is something that's annoying to you, then perhaps you want to look at something such as the iPad Air, or maybe even its competition, like the new Nexus 7 or Kindle Fire HDX, which I believe, technically speaking, have better displays. Okay, hopefully this is still going to work. My T4i just freaked out. It said video recording stopped even though I didn't hit the limit. So let's hope this video makes it up on YouTube by Tuesday. Alright, so getting back to the point, as I was trying to say before, my second con is iOS 7, unfortunately, still does not feel as optimized as it should be. Now, I will say it doesn't even feel perfect on something such as the iPad Air, and that's Apple's top iPad product, at least as of this recording. The fact that iOS 7 still does not feel silky smooth on the iPad Air and the iPad mini, it's definitely disappointing. Apple has a lot of homework to do. Now, fortunately, iOS 7 is still sort of a brand new product, and actually the biggest change to iOS 7 since, 2007. So hopefully this just means Apple's still getting some things ironed out, and we'll see hopefully some kind of significant update in January. At least one can hope. But still, overall, I gotta say, the iPad mini's performance isn't really a huge disappointment, such as, the gamut display is, in terms of the poor gamut, I should say. But the performance overall is definitely good enough. But hey, at least this thing's not as slow as the iPad 3 was. That was easily Apple's biggest, slowest, whatever you want to call it, upgrade, going from the iPad 2 to the iPad 3. It technically had better hardware, but because it was Apple's first full-size iPad with Retina display, performance definitely took a huge hit. And now for the third and final con. Perhaps this is just me being picky. Guys, you know me, I love my technology, I love Apple, but I am very picky. I have no problem in admitting that. I mean, I'm just extremely picky. And well, the speakers, they could be louder. Now, obviously, I know this isn't some hi-fi stereo system or anything like that, so you shouldn't expect room-filling sound, and trust me, that's definitely not the case. But I do feel the speakers could be just a tad louder. Now, I will say the speakers are loud enough in terms of just watching a YouTube video or playing music at your desk, but still, the speakers are definitely not loud and as rich as they are on the iPad Air. Okay, now my T4i seems to be working fine. I did a quick restart. That was weird. Maybe it was a quick bug in the software. Alright, so getting to the final part of this video, what is my verdict so far? Well, I gotta say, I am loving it, and yes, I am keeping it. This is, without a doubt in my mind, the iPad mini I've been waiting for two reasons alone. Retina display, and thin and light form factor. Alright, so with that said, I'm not ignoring the obvious. I do hope Apple improves two major things with the iPad mini 3rd generation. Again, number one, the color saturation is definitely a little pale. And number two, performance still needs work. But still, actually, number two, we don't have to wait for the iPad mini 3rd generation. That just kind of sounds like an iOS 7 optimization issue. So hopefully Apple pushes out a significant update very soon. But guys, trust me when I say this, I am loving my iPad mini. Ooh, look at that. It's as if the Apple gods are looking down on us. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, but seriously, this is a great device. Now, is it worth $400? I'm going to leave that up to you. I mean, it just comes down to what screen size you want and whether performance is a huge hit. Alright guys, that's it. So let me know what you think. Are you loving the iPad mini with Retina like I am? Or do you prefer the full-size iPad, such as the iPad Air? Or are you kind of retro and you're still sticking with the original iPad like my sister is? I don't know how she deals with that. Definitely let me know in the comments below. Guys, thank you so much for your continued support, and stay tuned for more tech videos and, of course, holiday videos. Peace.